All right, so maybe you want to make a Kurinuki container with many chambers. So the process starts the same. So if you haven't seen my first video on shaping and drying, watch that first. And now I want to think about how many sections. I'm going for a 3-chambered piece here, and I want to think about how and where I want to cut it. So I marked that out roughly, but of course when I go to cut it, I'll kind of freehand it a little bit. So I'm cutting in a slightly irregular shape so that it kind of locks itself in place. I'm still going to add a flange, which I'll talk about later. But I want to think about how these pieces all meet together. And of course it could be just like a straight cut across. It could also be one lid and 3 different chambers, right? So there's a lot of options here. So now I need to, I'll check kind of how they fit, but I need to mark out the walls and the different chambers. Leave it thicker than you think you actually need. So the first thing I'm going to do for this piece, because I have multiple sections, is mark where the lid sits, and then go a little bit inside each area. So I've marked out my wall, and I'm going to kind of cross-hatch out where I'm going to actually remove the clay so that I don't accidentally remove that wall that's dividing these chambers and also creating a place for my lids to sit. So if you've never created a Kurinuki container before or any sort of Kurinuki, then I would probably start with a single chamber, right, just to kind of get started. But if you've done this before or something similar and you're feeling really confident, or you just want to give it a go, then this would be, a great option. So now I'm going to mark out my lid as well, because even though my lid doesn't have to be hollow, it also doesn't need to be as heavy as it is with all that clay on there. So that area is super thin, so I'm going to just kind of shave that off because it's inevitably going to break anyways, so kind of controlling that. And you might need to do that in a few areas. So then, this is fairly straightforward. In this part, I'm just hollowing it out. I'm using my loop tool, and I do want to think about, of course, where the walls are and the angle of my piece. There's some areas that curve out and curve in, so how am I angling my tool to get into those kind of recessed areas? So paying attention to the form and how much and where to hollow it. I'm, making sure I'm checking all the time the thickness of the walls, and in this case, not just the outside walls, but also the inside dividing walls. So I sometimes will smooth it a little bit just so I can get a better sense of the thickness of the walls, and then go back and hollow it a little more. And I want to check my lid fit every so often, because as I'm hollowing, it is inevitable that I'm going to distort the shape a little bit. So I want to fix that before it dries out too much, because if it dries a lot and I try to press in, I could crack it. My clay is at a wet leather hard stage, so it is enough to hold its shape. And like I said, please make sure that you're constantly checking the thickness of your piece in all different areas, because while you can patch a hole, if you don't have to, let's avoid that, right? The other thing to keep in mind when you're making a Kurinuki container is how big is the opening and what are you reaching in to get, right? So that is a factor, like a practical design consideration. So now I'm hollowing out the lids. Again, that mostly is just to, lighten it up. It also gives you more clay to work with on future projects, right? All right, so sometimes I like to cut a piece of plastic to put down between my lid and the body, and that's mostly to keep it from sticking if my clay is fairly wet still. Later on I won't need or want to use this, but this is great if I'm trying to get it to fit and adjust the fit, right? So I'm gonna have to press it together because I wanna make sure that my lid fit on a multi-chamber piece with many lids butting up against each other. They need to fit, right? So I've got to press them back against each other, and so the plastic makes sure that they don't stick. So this is it. This is my multi-chambered form, and the next step on this would be to create the flanges on the lid to make sure they don't fall off. So I actually have another video where you can watch that, and I'll link that here for you to see.